You can't do it today. You can't walk into a storefront on a crowded city block, drop a single copper coin into a slot, and watch a moving picture through a private brass eyepiece while the man beside you listens to Sousa through a telephone receiver and the woman at the next machine learns her fortune from a mechanical mystic in a glass cabinet. That world existed. For nearly a decade, it was the most democratic entertainment technology the country had ever produced. And then, with a speed that surprised almost everyone who depended on it, it was over. The penny arcade didn't just disappear. It was outcompeted, outgrown, and ultimately abandoned by the very people who built it, all before most of its customers understood what had happened. The door opens before you touch it, held by a boy in a canvas apron who nods you through into a long, narrow room lit by bare bulbs and the warm glow of a dozen glowing cabinet windows. The smell hits you first. Machine oil, a faint trace of tobacco, something metallic and charged, like the air after a lightning strike. Somewhere at the back, a mechanical piano runs through a march tune, its hammers striking felt and brass in a rhythm that carries over every other sound in the room. You pull a penny from your coat pocket, worn smooth, cool against your thumb, and you look down a row of machines that stretches almost the length of the building. The first is an auto stereoscope, chest-high, dark oak cabinet with a brass viewer mounted at eye level. You drop the coin in, the slot clicks. You bend forward, and the eyepiece shows you two nearly identical photographs of a waterfall in Switzerland, and when your eyes settle, the image snaps into 3 dimensions so convincing you feel the spray. You step back, blinking. The man to your left is hunched over a mutoscope, a cast-iron pedestal with a crank handle on the side and a hooded viewer at the top. He feeds in his penny, grips the handle, and begins turning, slowly at first, then faster, the barrel inside clicking through card after card in rapid succession. A woman on a bicycle, her skirts blowing, the motion so fluid it looks alive. The machine ticks like a clock being wound. He turns the crank faster. She pedals faster. He laughs through his nose. Down the row, 2 young men in shirt sleeves stand at a machine labeled the Owl Dumbbell Lifting Tester. One grips the handle, and the cabinet lights up a column of bulbs one by one as he strains, shoulders bunching under his shirt, the needle swinging across a dial marked Good, Strong, Hercules. His friend counts aloud. A third machine over. A woman stands at the lady perfume sprayer, and a small mechanical arm extends and deposits a light mist of violet water onto her wrist. The arcade attendant circulates through the room, a young man of maybe 19, key ring on his belt, heavy with the specific keys that match each machine's coin box. When a phonograph cabinet jams mid-cylinder, he opens the side panel with practiced fingers, resets the needle on the wax recording, clicks it shut, and moves on without breaking stride. He knows every machine in the room by sound. And he knows which ones jam on damp days and which ones need their coin slots cleared every 2 hours. He is the human layer behind all of this mechanical wonder, and his presence is what keeps every coin earning its return. At the back of the room, near the player piano, 3 fortune-telling machines stand in a small cluster: the Sibyl fortune teller, the large horoscope cabinet with its brass astronomical face, and the Madame Neville palmist, which dispenses a printed card with your fortune pressed into its surface. You feed your penny into the horoscope machine. Gears turn somewhere inside the cabinet. A card drops into the tray. You pick it up. It reads, "A journey is coming. Trust the unfamiliar road. You've spent 4 cents and you haven't been bored once." And the penny arcade operated on a logic that seems almost impossibly clean in retrospect. The entire enterprise was built around one insight: that if you lowered the cost of each individual experience far enough, you didn't need wealthy customers. You needed volume. That idea came from a Buffalo entrepreneur named Mitchell Mark, who by 1901 was running amusement machines in a high-traffic location near the Pan American Exposition. His machines charged a nickel, which was standard. Then he dropped the price to a penny and watched what happened. What happened was that people who had walked past his storefront every day suddenly stopped because a penny was not a decision. A penny was just a penny. Mark took his earnings from Buffalo, opened a new arcade on Union Square in New York City in 1903, and built the Automatic Vaudeville Company, and which eventually operated roughly 35 arcades across the region. Other operators followed his model quickly. By 1905, Marcus Loew had opened the People's Vaudeville Company at 172 East 23rd Street in Manhattan, where he served as principal partner and general manager at a salary of $100 per week. The penny arcade had become an industry. The machines came primarily from two manufacturers, Mills Novelty Company in Chicago and Kyle Brothers in Detroit. A fully stocked premium arcade, as described in a Mills operating guide from around 1907, required an investment of approximately $5,000, equivalent to somewhere near $160,000 today. That sum bought you 24 auto stereoscopes, 8 illustrated song machines, 5 automatic phonographs, multiple strength and lung testers, 3 or 4 different fortune teller cabinets, electric shock machines, a player piano, and a rifle range in the back. The machines were meant to rotate between arcade locations in the same chain. A device that had grown familiar to customers in one location could be moved to another where it still felt new. What sold the arcade, above all else, was the sensation of novelty. Then 4 things happened, and none of them were the penny arcade's fault, and all of them were fatal. The first was the phonograph. Through most of the 1890s and early 1900s, listening to recorded music on a quality cylinder phonograph meant either owning an expensive machine or dropping a coin into an arcade model and holding rubber tubes to your ears while a tinny but recognizable melody played. The phonographs in working-class homes were uncommon because they were expensive. The mechanism required brass and precision that cost more than most families could spare. By 1905, cheap spring motors had solved that problem. Mass production brought the home phonograph within reach of working-class budgets. One of the arcade's most compelling attractions, personal access to recorded music, was now available in the parlor. The machine that had drawn people in daily now competed with something sitting on a shelf at home. The second force arrived the same year, and it moved faster. On June 19, 1905, a storefront theater opened in Pittsburgh, charging 5 cents admission to watch a program of short films projected onto a screen. It was called the Nickelodeon. The concept was not entirely new. Arcade operators had known about showing films in rooms above their main floor for at least a year. But the Nickelodeon made the screen experience the product itself, rather than a supplement. What the arcade offered through a Mutoscope or a kinetoscope was a private viewing of a short film loop for a penny. What a Nickelodeon offered was a shared room, a large projected image, an hour of entertainment, and a social experience for 5 cents. In towns where a factory worker earned somewhere between $8 and $12 a week, 5 cents was still affordable. And the screen was simply more. It was louder. It filled your whole field of vision. It was, for audiences in 1905 and 1906, overwhelming. Arcade operators understood what was happening. They responded the way businesses respond when they feel a threat coming. They tried to absorb it. Beginning around 1906, many arcades installed film projectors in loft spaces above their ground floors, renting out simple chairs and running short film programs. For a brief period, the same building might have a mechanical arcade on the ground level and a makeshift movie room upstairs. But by 1907, the motion picture business had developed its own operators, its own distribution networks, and its own economics, and those operators had no interest in the machines downstairs. The arcade and the cinema had separated. The cinema had taken the audiences with it. The third force was more gradual but equally corrosive: the erosion of respectability. Once the major attractions, films, and recorded music migrated to dedicated venues, yet the arcade's remaining draw shifted toward content the movie theaters wouldn't show: photographs and film loops with suggestive or risque subjects available through the peep show machines for those who knew to look. This pivot kept some revenue flowing in the short term, but made the arcade the kind of place that respectable people began to avoid. Landlords on busy commercial streets noticed. Rents held firm or rose while arcade revenues fell. The arcades that couldn't pay for prime locations moved to cheaper blocks, which attracted fewer casual passers-by, which reduced revenue further. By the early 1910s, the cycle had become self-reinforcing. The fourth force came not from competition, but from history. World War I drew resources and attention away from consumer manufacturing between 1917 and 1918, as slowing the development of new machines that might have refreshed the arcade's appeal. Then, Prohibition arrived in 1920 and shut down the bars and saloons that had served as secondary locations for coin-operated testers and novelty machines. The arcade's street addresses were shrinking. Its social context was contracting. The decade of the 1910s, as one historian of the industry put it plainly, was simply a hard decade. The people who had built the penny arcade did not mourn it. They had already moved. Marcus Loew heard about a penny arcade owner in Covington, Kentucky, who had rented a film projector and set up chairs in a room above his machines. Loew went to see it. Then he tried the same thing at his Cincinnati arcade one Sunday, renting a French comedy called Hot Chestnuts and arranging 110 chairs in the loft above his floor. And on that first Sunday, nearly 5,000 people paid to see it. The following week, he added 200 more chairs and drew over 10,000 customers. He understood what the numbers meant. Within a few years, he had converted his arcade holdings into a theater chain, and that chain eventually merged with others to become Loew's Theaters, one of the most powerful film exhibition companies in American history. Adolph Zukor and William Fox made the same calculation. They took the capital, the organizational knowledge, and the audience relationships they had built through the penny arcade and reinvested them in the cinema. The American Mutoscope Company, which had manufactured the machines that anchored the arcade, halted all Mutoscope production in 1906. The coin-operated amusement industry contracted sharply through the 1910s. It kept alive mostly by lingering novelty machines in train stations, hotel lobbies, and the occasional surviving storefront. The revival, when it came, arrived in a different form. By the early 1930s, a new concept called the Sportland had emerged. A venue focused not on passive novelty or peep shows, but on active games of skill. Tabletop football, crane machines, gun ranges, and a new amusement that was spreading through American storefronts with remarkable speed: pinball. By 1934, coin-operated amusement was generating over $10 million per year again. But the thing generating those revenues was not recognizable as the penny arcade. The Mutoscope was gone. The stereoscope row was gone. The fortune tellers had mostly vanished. The Sportland was a game room, not a mechanical theater. And the idea at the heart of the original penny arcade, that a single small coin could purchase a private encounter with technology that felt genuinely wondrous, had not survived the decade that killed it. But it wasn't just machines that disappeared. It was a particular kind of relationship between an ordinary person and the edge of what was possible. The penny arcade, at its best, made technology democratic in a way that hadn't existed before and would take decades to appear again. A factory worker in 1903 who had never seen a moving picture could walk into a building on a crowded block, drop a copper coin into a slot, and watch a man on a bicycle actually move across a frame, actually cast a shadow, actually turn a corner. The price of that experience was the same, whether you worked in a counting house or a tannery. And the machine did not know who you were. It only knew whether you had fed it. What also disappeared was the human layer that held the whole thing together. The attendant with the keyring, the mechanic who traveled between arcade locations with tools and replacement parts, the manager who knew from a week's coin counts which machines the neighborhood preferred and which ones sat idle. These were people who understood mechanisms at a granular level, the particular resistance of a wax cylinder when humidity rose, the exact coin weight that a mutoscope required to avoid jamming, the intervals at which an electric shock machine needed its battery checked. That knowledge was not written down in any manual widely preserved. It lived in the hands and habits of people who had no reason to record it because they expected the work to continue. And the knowledge did not continue. The work changed. The people adapted as people do, but the specific fluency they had, the ability to read a mechanical entertainment device by sound and touch, to diagnose a fault in seconds, to maintain a room full of completely different mechanisms in continuous operation. That fluency went with them when they left, and it left no clear successor. What the Penny Arcade story reflects, at a wider angle, is a pattern that ran through the entire first half of the 20th century. The repeated discovery that the technology people gathered to witness in public could eventually be made private and cheap. The phonograph, the film, the radio, each one followed a similar arc, moving from shared commercial novelty to household fixture within a generation. And the businesses that had monetized the public experience of those technologies either adapted or dissolved. What changed in each case was not just the business model, but something subtler, the shared nature of the encounter. When you listened to a recording through the arcade's rubber tube, you were one of dozens of people doing the same thing in the same room. When you listened at home, the experience was yours alone. Both were real. What they offered was genuinely different. Whether one was better is not a question with a clean answer. The home phonograph offered privacy, repetition, and comfort. The arcade offered the specific electricity of experiencing something remarkable in a crowd of strangers, all of them equally astonished, none of them prepared. Both things have value, only one survived. The Penny Arcade is largely gone from the physical world now. A few museums maintain working machines, and collectors restore individual mutoscopes and fortune tellers with extraordinary patience. If you have ever stood at one of those restored machines and turned the crank handle and watched the cards flip through their cycle, you know something that most people your age have never felt. That weight in your hand, that click and flash of sequential images blurring into motion, that is what it was. If this brought something back that you hadn't thought about in years, a machine you saw somewhere, a fortune teller in a hotel lobby, a memory you couldn't quite place, leave it in the comments. That is the part that doesn't appear in any industry history. That is the part only you carry. On if this kind of story is the kind you want to keep exploring, the quiet disappearances, the systems that made sense until they didn't, the things that lasted longer than you realized and ended faster than anyone planned. A like helps more people find this channel, and subscribing means you'll be here for the next one. The arcade is gone, but you remember what it felt like to stand at the machine, coin in hand, just before the world moved.